Man the Guns 2. It's coming. They're remaking Navy for Hearts of Iron 4 again. Some very key mechanics, such as naval supremacy, are completely being removed and replaced with naval dominance, what will work significantly differently. This is quite exciting because any change to Navy is a good one, because at the moment, what tends to happen is we get a naval change, small or big, DLC-wise or small patch-wise, and then eventually over time it just descends into this very simplistic meta. The idea is that Paradox wants to make multiple different ships on multiple different roles, but then we just descend into this gamey mechanic where we try and get the most naval supremacy to do naval invasions or convoy raiding. Well, hopefully that is out the window because they're now completely reworking some of these mechanics. And I've had a little read through this, and do you know what? Some of these are actually really, really good. It makes some of the existing mechanics that are quite binary a little bit more complex. And what we'll do in this video is we'll kind of go in depth and try and talk more about how I think they might work in the real world. Be aware, this is early access. Some of these mechanics are not fully fleshed out and they are still working in development, meaning some of these may change completely differently from when they release. There is a very, very small chance too that these mechanics may be completely ignored, and it might actually result in them completely backtracking on them. But for now, let's just presume they're real and they're a real thing. Some of these changes here are very early stage and are subject to change. Okay. The Navy seems rather hard to understand. It's a common complaint by the community. Then they learn it and they're like, you know what? I'm not really any wiser now I've learned it. That's very true. Some elements remain relatively hidden until actual shooting starts, supremacy value, ship screening, etc. That's right, actually, because a lot of the time people don't even know how screening works. People will say, what are screens? I mean, they're a classification of ship, but why is having screens important? And they're not aware of screening percentage efficiency, which doesn't come into play until you actually see a battle. Then you see the percentage numbers of battles. For instance, this is an example here. Does anyone really pay attention to this? I mean, you know that this side is the American fleet here. This side is the Japanese fleet on the right. Down here is ships that have been destroyed. And then you know that these numbers here across the top represent actual like physical damage numbers, how much has been dealt to either side. But then there's a lot of elements here that are missed. For instance, do you recognize these numbers here? 55, 55, 100%. Well, this is screening efficiency. So this, as far as I'm aware, is not going to change. So it's quite important that you might understand it from this video. But this basically tells you how many of the capital ships are being screened by the screening ships. So the first row is screens, second row is capitals, and the third row is carriers. So what it's saying here is 55% of these capitals are being screened by these screening ships, meaning torpedo damage can go through these and then hit the capital ships potentially. So what they're basically doing, screening basically just means is putting your hands around them and protecting them. And screens will fan out around a capital ship to prevent screens to get close enough to fire torpedoes. And the same applies for capital ships for carriers as well. If there's a screening efficiency at 100%, it basically means the torpedoes cannot reach the carriers because the capital ships are screening the carriers. However, this video is not talking about how Navy works, okay? We're going to be talking about the future changes. I thought I'd just detour onto that just for a second, just to confirm what I was saying. On top of that, we're having a fairly complex systems of naval missions where they would work best when using together synergistically. However, missions could be explained a bit better, and sometimes it is best to achieve your goal could be to somewhat counterproductive, such as a giant blob. What they would refer to that in multiplayer is the death stack. Basically making a massive navy, put them on strike force, and then basically getting full naval supremacy and denying naval invasions. And what's really sad as well, you could never strike a fleet on strike force because it's currently in port. So just think of the dynamics behind that. They're on strike force, they're projecting naval supremacy, but they're not actually available to be hit because they're at port. So it's like, what port are they at? They could be any port. It was such a bad mechanic. And to be honest with you, I abused it every single game because I just get the big death stack and I just sit in port with strike force. Boom, there you go. Free naval supremacy. Yeah, sitting idle in port, somewhat projecting naval supremacy across entire oceans without ever sailing out in one example. Guilty as charged. So the objectives are updating and reshaping naval combat, making it more strategic, giving you an opportunity for counterplay if you need be, or a bit more predictably, less flip-floppy. Updating naval missions so they become more intuitive, with a much cheaper purpose and use case. Update and communicate better to the player some of the intricacies of naval systems, and increase the importance of island control in the Pacific and naval logistics, which is a big one actually, because at the moment you can kind of ignore a lot of naval logistics. Having an extra element you have to care about, such as naval supply, is something just people just ignore about. There is, oh damn, I just thought for a second, there's an experimental research, isn't there? And it's that convoy raiding fuel thing that you can do. Is anyone familiar with it? You basically use convoys as a currency to increase the fleet's range. Has anyone ever used that mechanic? It's a cool mechanic. It's the idea of like basically fueling ships as they go with convoys by having like entourage of convoys. You know? No one even knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, updating carriers and addressing the interactions between land-based combat and naval task forces. Yeah, it's a big issue, that, isn't it? Because carriers serve two roles. They're a mobile airbase, so you can perform missions from the sea, which is a cool mechanic, don't get me wrong, especially for Japan, using CAS, for instance. But then there's a second thing. When they're actually involved in actual combat, the fleets the air wings take on like a completely different dynamic because they don't have like conventional missions anymore, like air superiority and naval strike. Anyway, updating the naval gameplay. Naval dominance. First of all, most importantly, changes that are introduced the concept of naval dominance. Naval dominance is a sort of umbrella term for a couple of things. Similar to how ships have naval supremacy value, now they have a naval dominance value. Oh, okay, so it suggests that they're going to have both naval dominance and naval supremacy, which will be displayed on the ship card. And there it is. They actually have a number now. It is 509 for this Nagato class ship. So now we have a number to represent how much of this is projecting. Prediction time. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm probably going to min-max this. Making ships in Hoi 4 is difficult because they take so long to build. And I wish they would address that mechanic at some point. But what I'm going to try and do is probably get the most cost efficiency for overall cost of the vehicle versus the amount of naval dominance I get out of it, and try and find that sweet spot in between. Next, we're going to talk about naval dominance, which is a way of indicating naval control of sea zones. Each sea zone, depending on the terrain value, has a certain threshold for dominance points you need to have before you can claim to control it. It'd be kind of cool if different ships had different values in different zones. For instance, an archipelago would obviously give more dominance to screening ships, for instance, proportionally, where in open oceans, I guess capital ships would have more of an advantage than carriers. Does that make sense? So doing a naval invasion through the Baltic is going to be very difficult if, for instance, it's full of screens, for instance. That would make sense. Dominance values and ratios between you and them, and also the ratio needed to control now has been adjusted for required 66% instead of 50.1%. Okay, so to do a naval invasion, to have naval supremacy, to do the naval invasion, you need 51% naval supremacy. You usually look at the number, you hover over it, and you're like 49, 48, 40, 50. Yay, naval invasion time. Yeah. Now you need 66%. Wow. Okay, that's going to make sea line a lot more difficult. Having control, as we call it now, establishing naval dominance in sea zone provides with the certain advantages and bonuses. Ooh, this is exciting. For instance, you can see in the screenshot below, potentially reducing the amount of convoys needed for trade and supplies by 25%. Wow. Now, I've spoken about this many times, guys. The reason people don't care about Navy in Hoi 4 is it doesn't make enough difference to the land values. So people just say, I'm going to ignore those mechanics because it doesn't determine enough outcome on the land battle for me to care. If I'm trading everything by land, then I don't have to worry about convoy raiding. If I don't care about battling them at Navy to get naval dominance, I'll not make a Navy. I suppose the only last thing to care about is shore bombardment, which can be quite strong, don't get me wrong, but still it feels like it's such a very small element to care about for something that requires so much production, which is naval dockyards. You know what I mean? Anyway, minimum naval dominance needed to control is 1,000. The current dominance is 299. And it does appear to reduce the convoys required to go through this zone by 25%. Okay, I'm trying to think of a practical example how this would benefit me. So if I'm Germany, I'm trading with Siam for rubber. I'm going to need less convoys now if I control certain regions that are moving through those regions. I can't think of a realistic, plausible situation where I'd feel like I'd take advantage of that mechanic and actually use it. You got me there, guys. If anyone's got a suggestion in the comments, let me know. To keep control of the deep ocean region, you will need to accommodate at least 1,000 points of worth of dominance, assuming nobody else can contest you. We have 100% control, but to have the minimum naval dominance, what does naval dominance give me? Okay. So naval dominance gives you this stat, which is naval dominance, which allows you to have less convoys. I wish it would give more bonuses in this. But the problem then is if it gives too much, it would incentivize people to death stack, wouldn't it? To try and stack naval dominance. But still, 1,000 is a lot to say that there's... Well, actually doesn't say how many ships. It just gives a dominance number. Okay. Dominance gain. So you have 100% control, 299 dominance, increasing to 1459 in 49 days. Okay, so it looks like you start off a minimum amount of dominance and it gains over time depending on how long you've controlled a specific region. So I would imagine that the UK now will build up dominance in the English Channel, and it would be very difficult to dethrone their dominance in the English Channel to make that naval invasion. Okay, interesting. It does appear that air bases is also adding to that current dominance. The way it used to work, well, how it currently works, is that air superiority adds on top to naval supremacy. So I presume that's how those two mechanics work in conjunction with one another. Dominance, as opposed to the previous supremacy system, now takes time to establish, but also doesn't simply instantly disappear when ships disengage in combat. Right, so it's a number that works its way up over time, and then when you leave that region or get destroyed or annihilated, it slowly works its way down. So the numbers aren't basically spiking. So one of the issues you used to find in multiplayer, well, in single player too, is that if the AI removed their navy, it would go from 80% dominance down to 30%, literally instantly. So now those numbers will naturally have like a natural progression up and down, which is a fantastic system. It's way better. Missions now are divided into two categories. Patrol, convoy raiding, convoy escort, and strike force are classed as core missions. And there are also auxiliary missions, which is naval exercise and mine laying, mine sweeping. So presuming core means they gain naval dominance when they're on those roles. And then auxiliary mean they just do something else. I'm presuming what they want to do here is combine a core mission with an auxiliary to get some kind of hypothetical bonus. It's going to be interesting to play around with this one to know how it's going to work in the real world. Once again, reading the theory is one thing, but playing the game is different. So they are reworking naval home bases and range and supply. And you can see here, this fleet, this Dutch fleet is based in this port. I believe this is somewhere in Indonesia, I believe. No, is it not? Is it actually referring to this specific? No, because this is a German fleet. Okay, so it's showing a German fleet here. Never mind. This one isn't the same one. So now, instead of naval missions being assigned for all available ports you have access to, it is now only the ones based in the home base. So this is how it used to look, I'm presuming. So you can see it had access to all of these regions based on home bases. And now it'll have only access to these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So significantly less. I know why they're doing this. This is to prevent death stacking. So if you assign a home port and it's a very big fleet, it will destroy the supply in that region. And therefore, the fleet will then have a supply problem. Because what the meta was in the past is you'd find a level 10 port, there's good access to your capital with good supply, assign that as the home base by holding control and right-clicking on the port, and then just doing your missions anywhere else. So the home base didn't really matter, to be fair with you. So now you would have a penalty to supply for that specific port, which is just such a big deal, because no one cared about supply for navies in the past. It was just something that just wasn't even something you thought about. This also means you're not able to do the strategy now that you can put it on Strike Force and just click every single province and literally have full naval dominance of the North Atlantic, which I always thought was mega broken. Naval supply. Previously, naval units would always draw supplies from naval bases closer to where the task forces were operating. Now they will be drawing supply from their selected home base. And I have a feeling the farther away from the home base they are, the more supply they're going to use, aren't they? The fleet has a home base set in Honolulu and is operating in the Micronesian Gap. Despite the port in Johnson Atoll being closer, it draws supply from the Hawaiian home base because it needs that level of supply, because each port uses a set amount of supply. And you can see, look, this port is oversupply. So there'll be some kind of penalty affecting the fleet. So you'd have to be very careful where you assign your fleet. I'll be honest with you, this frustrates me a little bit, because this tells me, one, you have to build ports, and then two, we have to micro ships now. Oh no, I have to micromanage my boats. No. This is probably one of the bigger changes, this one, which I think is interesting. Microing the fleets in the Pacific was always a bit of a ball ache. I'm curious to see if this makes life easier and better. We'll see. Definitely focusing on range now is going to be important, and building those ports up is going to be easier. One of my fears with this too is a lot of mining nations don't have a lot of civilian factories, so building these ports, if necessary, is going to be very, very cumbersome. It's not so bad for a nation like America, like in the Pacific here, because building a level 10 port is something you're just going to do naturally anyway, isn't it? Okay, next change. Gotterdammer introduced terrain-based limits for province-based buildings like forts and coastal forts. Very good change, by the way. I really do support that change. It's kind of a weird computer gaming mechanic if forts are between 1 and 10 everywhere, or 0 and 10 everywhere. So it's kind of cool that they had limitations based on terrain values and locations, which is really cool. In a similar part, we'll be introducing a state-based building limits for buildings. In this case, we're now focusing on putting limits on various island categories, so not every single tiniest island can have an airbase capable of storing and launching for a mission 2,000 planes every day. Right now, those caps are based on the island state categories of tiny island, small island, and large island. And upon one concept we will talk about in the future. I mean, I always thought it was stupid to build a level 10 airport in Gibraltar. Now, I've been to Gibraltar. Now, there is an airport there, but they've artificially had to put it on the road that literally comes into the Rock of Gibraltar. So it's basically, I mean, I could probably find a picture. You can actually see the airport from here. You can see the airport from here. Look, there you go. So as you access the island, well, sorry, not the island, the peninsula, you go through here. Well, you can just see there's an airport that cuts across the road that enters the peninsula. So there's no way you could get a level 10 airbase in Gibraltar. It's just not possible. So the question is that Gibraltar isn't an island, it's a peninsula. So will this include those suggestions? I really should hope so. And the same would apply for Hong Kong and Macau, I guess. Maybe not so much Hong Kong. Hong Kong's quite big, isn't it? I don't know, but I would imagine a level 10 airbase there is just a bit silly. Anyway, then we can see here now, this Marcus Island has a maximum of 2 air bases, and then that's it. Everything else looks the same. We can still build a level 5 fort. What? Oh, it has a maximum naval base too of 1 of 3. Oh, that's big, because that actually means there are some areas of the world now that will not have the capabilities to manage a very, very large fleet. So as we mentioned before, death stacking is harder now because of the home base mechanic and supply mechanics. But then stop it off as well. You just can't put big naval bases. So you are forced to make smaller navies. I'm going to be totally honest with you. My prediction here is I will still ignore this mechanic and death stack unless the supply penalties are justified and are bad enough for me to care. Because land supply, when it's low, destroys you. We all know, Tommy K says it over and over again, supply is king, you know? So if the penalties for navies were worse, or even, yeah, not even just the same, but worse, yeah, I would definitely try to find ways of making small fleets. It would convince me to do that. Before writing this section, I was going to write how I envision things mentioned so far will change the naval gameplay, how X and Y impact. However, I think it's more interesting in hearing from you. That's really true. They shouldn't suggest how the meta is going to evolve. They should let the audience, let the viewers, and let the players actually decide that. The rework in Naval Invasion 2. In the current live version of the game, there's a global naval invasion capacity limit set by technologies, doctrines, and other modifiers. This system had an issue where they would order to be more optimal by encouraging spam 1 divisions naval invasions. I would never do this because I felt it was too click intensive. And the meta was to like do a naval invasion with each individual unit from each individual port and then just kind of sprawl them all in one location. I hated doing that because it was just too click intensive. The micro was too much for me. Too many clicks. RSI, I have to worry about it. I'm an old man. So I would just make 40 divisions or 24 divisions or one big naval invasion. In the new system, depending on the technologies, doctrines, etc., a certain amount of naval invasions you can plan at the same time, each being able to have a certain amount of divisions no matter what, always taking a specific amount of time to plan. Also, for a country that hasn't been researched even basic transport technology, there will be a possibility to launch a very limited naval invasion under the system. Oh, give us 2 or 3 divisions. Come on. It was always weird as Mexico to do a naval invasion of Panama, but you couldn't do it until you got the technology. It's like they've not discovered the idea of moving people on ships. Like, oh, what's this concept of ship movement? What is this? Appealing to the lizard brain. I don't even need to read this. Now, if you have naval dominance in a sea region, it will change color. Oh, come on. Come on. You know that's cool, right? Come on. That's so cool. So these regions are colored in by Japan because they have naval dominance in those regions. That's so good, though, is it? So visual. You know what I mean? You can actually see where navies are being projected. That's so cool. This is the current prototype showing the default map mode has naval dominance. So it's the default map mode. It's the one you're looking at most of the time. And these areas have naval dominance. In this case, Japan has the most dominance. Nobody's effectively contesting it. Thus, Japan colors are displayed on the map. To wrap things up, I've not touched upon anything of the carrier-related new equipment or new tools yet. Wow, there's going to be new naval equipment, new tools, and more UI updates, and carriers are going to get changed as well. I'll return in due time to provide you with more information about things that are not dry. In the meantime, here's a teaser of a thing we can talk about in future with beautiful placeholder art. Can you guess what it is? We have a sun. So is this weather? He's saying yay because of the sun. He's got a lollipop and he says support. Any suggestions, chat? I know what this is. This is a submarine, isn't it? This isn't a ship. And they're using the sun to power the batteries of the ship. So a little unknown fact is in World War II, submarines had to resurface to recharge their batteries. So they would spend the majority of the time above water, not below. They would only dive for combat. And I have a funny feeling, well, maybe it's oxygen, but I'm implying with the sun and the lines here, it's having to surface. I'm not sure what this means, but this looks like maybe a nerf for submarines. I would imply this is a nerf for submarines, not above. Because once again, as I mentioned to you before, submarines spent the majority of the time in World War II above water. They would travel at their maximum speed above water. They would also charge their batteries above water, and they would only dive for very limited periods because the technology of oxygen, charging the batteries, and the amount of speed that they could travel at while submerged was more limited. So they wouldn't actually dive unless there was a combat situation. With every dev diary, there are a bunch of Q&A questions. Will there be text that increase naval base caps or small islands? Floating dockyards and dedicated ship repairs enable serious repairs near the front line. Will naval supply systems interact with the forward replenishing project? Oh, this is the secret project I mentioned earlier. Is horribly expensive and doesn't really do much to use. Oh, wow. Okay, so that's the first review of this new mechanic. Will there be ways to increase the range of submarines, something like resembling the Type X? We do not have dedicated plans to increase the naval base caps on islands. They will be very niche, populate and add rather not needed bloat to the already massive naval tech windows. However, without spoiling much, not every island will be the same. Oh, what are they saying? Not every island will be the same. What does that mean? The Special Underwater Replenishment Project from Gotterdammer currently works just as before. Extends the range of naval task forces. So it possibly could mean you could go from 200k operation range from all naval bases to 3,000, which is massive. 50% extra range is huge. But it does consume quite a lot of convoys until you turn it off. If I'm interpreting this right, Strike Force can no longer build dominant supremacy by itself. This might be the best update ever. I'm complaining this for years. You are correct. This is interesting and definitely a step forward in naval mechanics. Have you considered introducing a naval-only research slots for countries? I'm so against this. We do not have plans to introduce category-specific research slots. Some mods do this, and I kind of get why people want this. However, I feel like it takes away some of the sandbox nature of Hoi 4. Hoi 4 needs to be a game where you can choose to do, for the most part, anything that you want in whatever direction you want to go. And I don't like this idea of like railroading certain mechanics. So I'm really happy the devs have said a big no to that one. I think in Black Ice, I think there are research slots on there that are dedicated for certain things, which is kind of cool in a way because it just shows like there is a naval section of your nation that will focus on naval technology, which I think is cool, and it means you're not neglecting Navy. But once again, I don't like the idea it's railroaded. What happens when a fleet is manually moved to a new port? With a home base change, for example, as England, I can send a task force to Hong Kong and trust they will carry out missions there at their base in England. Needless to say, manually moving from home base could certainly confuse players wondering if their fleet has no range to a port. You would need to set Hong Kong as the new home base before sending the fleet there. If there is no range to operate there, but switching home base can right now by control right clicking. Everyone forgets about control right clicking. No one does it. I wonder if there's a situation where if you move the fleet outside of its range to another port, it would be so far away from its home base, it would consume a lot of supplies, such as convoys. Maybe the game doesn't even let you move home base outside of your existing range. I probably imagine it wouldn't let you. It would cause some weird glitches with low convoys and stuff. Agree on the edit. You have a full doctrine as USA with zero effort. Can we get clapper in the chat, boys? Can we get a big clap? That's 100% correct. If you naval exercise from the very beginning of the game as USA, when you start the war, you have got your full naval doctrines, which completely defeats the point of naval doctrines. The idea of a naval doctrine is you are discovering warfare while you fight it, and therefore you discover new doctrines and new breakthroughs of how Navy works and how war is being fought. And this concept of just we've figured it all out before we've even gone to war and had a single battle is just stupid. We're making some changes to how naval XP is being generated. We definitely want to lower the crazy XP gain from naval exercises. However, we also want to encourage people being a bit more active with their fleets. Numbers are absolutely placeholder-ish. Do not read too much into the amounts of XP. Wow, that's basically nothing. Nothing. I hope that's not USA. I mean, the naval thing is quite good for small nations with a decent sized navy like Netherlands, for instance. Netherlands has got a unique situation where they've got enough oil to maintain their fleet permanently on exercising and a decent sized fleet to gain enough XP. It's kind of cool that you have the ability to kind of get some doctrines before the war kicks off, but it all depends on what nation this is. We just don't know. It's just a guess, isn't it? There needs to be a way the system works a bit differently. There should be like an overhead cap. It should give a decent amount whatever you're doing so you can actually feel like you're gaining something from it. But there should be a maximum head over limit. And if you're going over that amount, you should astronomical penalties to the amount of naval XP you get. Like the fact is, as America, you can gain like 1 or 2 naval XP per day. It's just way too high, man. You shouldn't even be getting anywhere near 1 per day. Maybe the maximum before the big penalties start kicking in, it should be like 0.1 per day. But how much is this? This is 0.05. Okay. The change from naval supremacy to dominance looks interesting. Once you've defeated the enemy fleet, your fleet has nothing to do. Oh god, this is so true. It'd be great if battleships could provide active bombardment of enemy airfields in islands or could do damage to enemy coastal forts before the naval invasion take place. Yep, this is so true. I look forward to more changes on carriers, such as port striking, which is an old mechanic that needs updating. This is a dev diary, not a dev corner, so it shows an early look at some of the interesting things we're changing, not a whole set. This kind of suggests they're reworking port striking, because they've said in the previous dev diary that Japan will be looked at again in a future DLC. So this almost implies to me that they're going to rework port striking, you know, to do basically a Pearl Harbor attack, aren't they? He's right, though. He's right, though. You invest so much time and energy into a navy making dockyards. And once the navy has fulfilled its role and it's completed that role, it becomes redundant, you know? It just becomes this floating consumer of fuel. And naval invasion support is okay, I guess. I mean, it's not bad, but once again, it's not good enough to justify having this massive fleet just consuming fuel. Are there any plans to rebalance the module ships, the design as well? Looking at the Panzer, Schniff, and the CDS hull having 3,500 metric tons, a higher cost than the 1944 battleship hull. Currently obscurely expensive to build or refit, not to mention costing even more steel. No promises, but I do definitely want to take a look at some of the numbers, stats, and values. It's quite high on my personal list. I mean, to be fair though, this ship is historically meant to be an expensive ship, because what Germany was doing is trying to get around the Treaty of Versailles, weren't they? So they were making a ship that was very small hull-wise, but were carrying very large guns. So they kind of had to reverse engineer a ship that could meet those characteristics. So it wouldn't surprise me why this ship would be expensive. I suppose the problem with Hoi 4 is there are no actual core mechanics that make you need to want to make this ship. At the very beginning of the game, you could just make a regular battleship. So it's like, what's the point of this ship, you know? Will there be any rebalances to naval tech tree or the production outputs currently? Building capital ships from 936 to 940 is almost never worth doing. So true. Anytime the research, I'll stop building them. Capitals from Foy Tech or dockyards are 43, which time the naval game is already over. As mentioned, and somewhere else, no promises. It's something quite high on my personal to-do list. Fixing this one's going to be very difficult. I've always suggested that if a nation doesn't have much navy, they should have a button like for minor powers that lets you increase naval dockyard speed by spending political power. I've always thought that should be a thing. Maybe it eats consumer goods. It's basically like working conditions, but for ships, and it increases ship production output by 50% or something for like 6 months or something. But only minor powers can do it. So the minute you become a major power, you lose that ability to have that luxury. You know what I mean? It just gives an opportunity for a minor power to speed up the naval race. I worked with Florius, you know, the YouTuber, a long time ago on a mod that allowed Greece to do exactly that. It was basically reverse MEFO bills. Just by the way, Florius made the mod. It was just my idea that I injected with him. And the idea is that whenever the MEFO bills were still active, the ships were really, really cheap. But the longer you kept the MEFO bills active, it would eat into your consumer goods. So the idea is your entire economy slows down to nothing, but you're directing all the country's resources towards naval production. It was a really cool concept, and did a really good job making that, actually. I'm confused. They may be confused to new players. People don't read the tooltips fully, which realize people are surprised that it can order training exercises to stop automatically after reaching a certain limit. So basically it mentions at the top here that there's a certain key mechanics that people aren't aware of until they watch a YouTuber. True. If the player has a fleet selected and right-clicks on the port, which is more likely, would they want the fleet to move to that port or change it? Okay, it's basically asking about the port mechanics. Speaking of ranges, I do wonder if the switching bases actually requires range or not. Okay, what does it say? One of the reasons why I prefer keeping the right-click switching to home base over right-click is the player can always select just a single task force out of the fleet, a right-clicking and switching to the home base for the entire fleet instead of just sending it to repairs. Okay. For people that would not know, the ability to control right-click will be selectable lists of naval bases that you can open by clicking on the naval base. That's cool. My second question, you're allowed to switch naval bases even technically they are out of range. This is what I said earlier. Ships will move to that base and will be able to operate in the new place after they arrive. Blocking this would result in, more often than not, requiring players to do some kind of weird rebase dance every time they wouldn't have to move fleets, which is previously what I said. Just be interesting to see if they're very, very far away from the home base, whether they're experiencing some kind of penalty. Big question everyone's going to ask me right now, is this free or is this going to be part of the DLC? Be honest with you guys, the Paradox have made this very clear. All we know is these are dev corners, not dev diaries, meaning these are early looks at new upcoming features. And I'll be honest with you, I'm more leaning towards this being a Japan DLC thing than it being free. No one's actually specifically said free or paid. No one's actually made that crystal clear yet. So at the moment, that's still a big unknown. And there will be more dev diaries. If you don't want to miss that kind of content and want YouTube to push that more content to you, don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to comment below. doing those two three things will give you access to heaven. And it means also YouTube will give you more of that content in the future. Any questions, please comment below. Apart from that, au revoir.